having the conversation around risk mitigation, financial planning, when it comes to property investments, especially tenant relations and tenant management, it's very important to first understand obviously the different options available and why these exist and what one can actually do to mitigate this risk. So if you break it into a process of step by step, starting at the beginning and working your way up until something that works for you as a landlord. First thing is the vetting process. And our vetting process is absolutely crucial. And I think, unfortunately, that a lot of landlords don't place enough emphasis on this. They list their properties, they go for the highest price humanly possible. They get a few applications, they pick the one they like the most, and off they go. Proper vetting is crucial. And even with us, we've got a partnership with Preferential now because they've got a great screening program where you plug in all the information as a landlord, generate a link, and this link goes out to the tenants. The tenants pay for their own vetting, and it comes back to the landlord with the scores, with all the information and documentation that they need, requiring the landlord only to phone possibly the previous landlords or the current employees in order to make sure that all the information is verified. I mean, this software, as an example, actually has AI that looks at the supporting documents that the tenant submits to ensure that they're not fraudulent, because it's very easy to fabricate bank statements and pay slips and all the rest. So your tenant might look great on paper, but if their paper is not real, it's going to hurt you in the long term. So this vetting process is crucial. And if you're doing it yourself, please make sure to use the right platform. You can approach us, we'll give you the link, and it's something that the tenant pays for, so it's at no cost to you. There is no question about it. I wouldn't understand why you'd want to do it any other way, unless you're actually making use of a leasing agent, in which case you have to make sure the leasing agent actually knows what they're doing, because some leasing agents may stop at a certain point. And this brings me to the next thing. Your quality of tenant is very dependent on the quality of your property and the quality of, and rather the amount of rent that you're looking to acquire. What we typically tend to find is if you advertise your property above the usual asking price in the area, you're still going to get applications. And this makes you happy because you're getting applications going, sure, I thought I could do it for 5.5, but I'm getting people applying for 6. But who do you think is applying for 6? Right? The guys that know they can get accommodation are applying for the lower ones. The ones that are being rejected are normally the ones applying for the higher ones because they're struggling. So they're applying for the higher ones, and they're going to get the higher ones because now your pool of potential tenants is a lot smaller. So please be very careful on what you advertise the property for. I personally would rather advertise for slightly lower, so I've got a greater pool of tenants, than higher and get stuck with a pool of tenants that are going for the higher price simply because they're being rejected. So that's definitely the consideration. Also, value of the property or quality of the property. Different tenants, different areas, different types of properties. So you also need to understand your own tenant. If you're sitting in an area, as an example, or a property type that unfortunately attracts tenants that are not necessarily high income earners or are actually low income earners, just mitigate your risk. If you understand that that is a risk, if you understand there's a risk that rent will not be paid in that type of property, mitigate it. Now, what do I mean by that? Next thing to discuss. What are the possible, call it insurance or coverage, that you can get when it comes to rent and tenants? Now, on the one hand, you've got rental guarantees that some companies offer. What's this mean? If the company, the insurer, is happy with the type of tenant you placed on the property, they may actually insure you for the rent that you don't receive. Preferential, again, as an example, in that pre-screening tool I just spoke about, if they feel that the tenant carries some risk, they will actually suggest that a double deposit be charged, and they will then ensure the payment of this double deposit, affording the tenant allowing the tenant to pay it off over time, because not all tenants have enough money to pay a double deposit up front. But they'll actually insure the deposit to make sure that you as a landlord are completely covered and that you've got the full deposit whether the tenant paid it or not. So as an example, there's deposit guarantee, there's rental guarantees, and of course, with the likes of Expello, there's eviction guarantees. I'm on Expello's panel, so what happens? You go to Expello, they basically vet your tenant, and if they're happy with it, they take on that risk. And if the tenant fails to pay and it's time to evict them, they approach Bruno. Bruno starts the process and Expello pays the legal costs, and you as a landlord don't have to worry about it. How do you cover all these costs, which is one of the questions that Intabi Singh asked. Now, this is completely up to you. A lot of people build this into the rent and they don't charge it as a separate charge. They build it into the rent, but there are situations where the landlords actually tell the tenants, listen, unfortunately, you do carry risk. So for me to take you on, I do expect you to pay this cost yourself. Are you happy with it? And if the tenant understands the need for this and is willing to respect it, they sometimes will cover the cost themselves. So you can make provision either which way, but these would typically be the mechanisms that you would use in order to manage your risk when it comes to the potential of non-paying tenants and tenants wanting to squat on the property, even after a lease agreement is cancelled.